drug-related violence, but the condition of the body suggested something else. The Freetown Fall River State Forest covers nearly 5,000 acres of rugged terrain. Dense pines, granite outcroppings, and isolated trails. It's beautiful in daylight, but when the sun goes down, it becomes something else. Rangers have described...
Creature like that. How would it ever die?
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. It's horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows. In the early hours of July 1947, something came down in the desert outside Roswell. It didn't explode, didn't burn, and it didn't leave a crater. Just a wide scattering of strange debris stretched across a remote ranch, as if the sky itself had become blown apart mid-flight. Within days, the United States Army would announce to the world it had recovered a flying disc. Within hours of that announcement, that story would be erased, replaced with a mundane explanation and a forced calm. But the damage was already done. Whatever fell near Roswell that night didn't just hit the ground, it shattered trust, ignited decades of secrecy, and became the moment when modern UFO mystery truly began. Tonight, on Beyond the Shadows podcast, we are discussing the Roswell crash. That's right.
Oh my gosh, geez, yes, that is right. Welcome in, folks. Welcome in. We've done it. We've made it to season 3. Freaking season 3, can you believe it? I can barely believe it. We've made it. We made it. Season 3, folks. This is season 3, episode 1, Beyond the Shadows podcast. We did it. 2 full seasons, and we got to start on the 3rd one. We're ready to do it, and we did it. Tonight, we're live on Twitch. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. I'm going to do my best to monitor all these chats, just to see what's going on. I have no clue how well this is going to work out. We're going to see what happens. But I think we're going to do good. I really do. I am very excited. Very excited. I'm just making sure I can see everything here. Okay, yeah. This looks good. All right. Everything's running. Everything's strong. Welcome in, folks. Welcome in. So glad you're here. The start of a new season. We did it. We made it through season 1, through season 2. And thanks to all the supporters on Facebook, we are live on Facebook tonight. I'm really looking forward to this because I've been wanting to be live on Facebook for, who knows how long at this point, right? Let me make sure my volume's up all the way here. It seems a little quiet to me. Maybe it's just me. Anywho, welcome in, everybody. I'm your host, Victus, and this is Beyond the Shadows podcast, where we record a live podcast, one take, no edits, and try to figure out if this week's case is really paranormal or just bullshit. This week, we are discussing the Roswell UFO crash of 1947. You know the one I'm talking about, the Roswell, New Mexico crash, the one that everybody talks about. This is the one that the crowning jewel of UFO conspiracy, UFO folklore. This is the one that really set it off, excluding Betty and Barney Hill. But that was season 1. I'll let you go back and watch that for yourself. So excited! I'm so excited. It's kind of 5 o'clock in the evening. I drank a very strong cup of coffee before we started, and I'm hoping I don't crash. Anywho, a couple little tiny announcements. Hold on. We do have a couple new followers. I should have already had this up. Shame on me. Lots of comments on the new videos that we uploaded to YouTube. Lots of people with like really negative comments for no reason. Like, hey, come on, chill out. It's just a podcast. You didn't got to be so serious. Why so serious? Shout out to Kimberly Sue Cassidy for the follow on YouTube. Shout out to Lindy Night Owl Paranormal TN, so I'm guessing Tennessee. Thank you for the follow on YouTube. You guys are great. Lots and lots of comments. Shout out to California 2479. I look like you're one of your friends from high school, apparently. I promise I've never been to California. But no, thank you everybody. It's just been an absolutely wonderful week. Lots of interactions with the socials. Lots and lots of people just really coming through with the comments and the likes. Wonderful week for Retraction. We did so good this week. Hard to believe that Puppy, how you doing? Glad you're here. Welcome. We did so good with all the socials this week, and usually like numbers are like single, maybe double digit, and we did triple into quadruple digits in almost everything that we posted this week. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you're here. So glad indeed. Welcome in. This is your first time in the podcast. I'm so glad. I love having new friends here in the chat. I'm really hoping this is going to be a good one. So, in the spirit of transparency, for all of season 1, I did try to avoid the topics that are a little beaten to death. I said I would never cover Mothman, but we covered Mothman last season. I said we'd never cover Bigfoot, but we probably will. And I also said we'd never cover Roswell. Alas, here we are. We are here to cover the Roswell crash tonight, and I think it's time. I really do. It makes sense that now that we've found our feet as a podcast, that it's time to go back and look at the big cases. To like really see, you know what I mean? To really see, and that's the plan. It's very possible that we may not cover, something like Bigfoot, because I think just recently it was discovered that it was fake. So still up in the air about that. But it is what it is. But before we dive too deep into tonight's main story, it's time for This Week in Paranormal News. Blah, 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 blah. It's a segment where we look at some of the strange, unexplained, and unsettling stories making headlines right now. And these are reports coming in from around the world that don't quite fit in anywhere. Don't come with easy answers and remind us that the unknown isn't something buried in the past. It's still happening. So, are you guys ready for this week's news in paranormal? Let's do it. First and foremost, we have the why is it always something with crazy freaking words? So we got celestial weirdness, possible sightings. We have a meteor shower coming up. One of the year's strongest but brief meteor events peaked earlier this week. It's often mistaken for UAP activity, but because of sudden bright fireballs against the night sky, especially when combined with this week's Wolf supermoon, making skywatching anomalies harder to rule out. We have some paranormal events and investigations coming up. Paranormal investigators, including Adam Berry of Kindred Spirits and Ghost Hunters fame, hosted a public ghost investigation at the Mark Twain House on January 3rd. These rare public investigations draw both enthusiasts and skeptics into historically haunted settings. Paranormal Underground magazine dropped its December 2025 issue, packed with ghost stories, UFO encounter summaries, and reports from field investigations, a fresh resource for listeners interested in real-world anomaly reports. UFO Culture and Media gives us that while not an official scientific report, a recurring theme in UFO culture coverage continues to be discussion of secret files, drone swarms, and sightings tied to nuclear sites, a narrative that parallels Roswell's enduring mystery. In diving off into the paranormal and arts and entertainment, a new ghost stories TV/streaming production titled Haunted or Not is gearing up for release in January of 2026, blending real eyewitness accounts with follow-up investigations, an interesting pop culture reflection of public appetite for paranormal storytelling. Disembodied voices at the Waikiki Hotel, guests and staff at the historic Queen Kapiolani Hotel in Hawaii have reported hearing unexplained voices and sounds late at night, with some claiming the phenomena are rooted in the island's layered history long before the hotel was built. And on January 3rd, 2026, the Ghost Doctors are hosting a UFO-focused paranormal tour. Oops, we're a day late on that one. Blending ancient astronaut lore with modern sightings and hands-on investigation techniques for attendees. UnexplainedMysteries.com published its top 10 paranormal stories of the year, covering everything from spectral encounters to strange sightings that captivated audiences worldwide for a great retrospective look at a recent unexplained phenomena. Haunted footage going viral this week. Social media is buzzing with videos supposedly capturing ghostly events on a road in Colombia's Telema region, adding yet another region to the growing global list of viral paranormal clips this week. And we also have weird lights and UFO patterns near nuclear test sites. A recent analysis connected UFO-like transient lights and archived observatory images with historical nuclear test dates. And odd correlation that continues to fuel discussions on unexplained aerial phenomena and nuclear site activity. And those are just a few of the strange stories making waves this week. Whether they're the result of coincidence, misinterpretation, or something far more unsettling, they serve as a reminder that not everything around us is easily explained. And if history has taught us anything, it's that today's unanswered questions often become tomorrow's greatest mysteries. Fantastic. So, I was on the phone with the Pentagon this week. And I tried to get connected to my contact in the Pentagon because I wanted to pass along my questions about UAPs, about what's really going on. And they transferred me to the underground department. They answered the phone.
Hey, happy 2026.
Blip, hello, welcome. Happy 2026. Happy season 3. Happy season 3 indeed. Yes, welcome. Glad you're here. Welcome, Blip. You caught it right at the beginning. We're covering the big bad, the crown jewel of the paranormal tonight, depending on how you look at it. But I was just talking about when I called the Pentagon. They transferred me to the underground department, and the person that answered the phone asked one question, and one question only. They asked me, "What shirt are you wearing today?" Yeah, this really happened. Was I leading you on? Did you feel like there was something coming? Like I was really on the phone with the Pentagon? That was good. I'm trying to build that up a little bit more. Build the suspense, you know what I mean? There's so many gaps in the story and like blank spaces in the script that I'm trying to fill it with something fun. All right, just trying to make it fun. That's all. So yeah, this is a fan favorite. For those of you watching on Facebook tonight, this is probably your first time watching this, but this is a fan favorite segment, and it's called "What Shirt Are You Wearing Today?" our own little custom song made and everything. Essentially, all we're going to do is look and see what shirt I'm wearing today. I got a new one. So for anybody that's watched any of this podcast knows that I'm a Goofy movie fan. I love me some Goofy movie, like Powerline fan all the way. I know all the words to all of the songs in Goofy movie. Check out this sweet shirt I got for Christmas. Yes. There we go. Yeah. Max and Roxanne says
YESSSSSS.
says eye to eye at the top. Big Goofy movie fan. This is this one. I planned on wearing this one last week, but I wore it so much when I got it that it was dirty by the time it was time to do this show. So I was not able to wear it last week. So this week we got it. We got it this week. Love my Goofy movie stuff. And Puppy, I'm so glad that you love. Apparently, you're a Goofy movie fan too. We have fun here. We try to anyway. Well, all right, you jerks. Are you guys ready to dive off into this? We've got a really strange investigation. We got some photos to look at. What else do we have? We got 5 or 6 good photos. Oh, I got a sneeze coming too. Haven't sneezed in days until I get live. Jeez. Thank goodness for a mute button. Oh yeah, we got tons of really great information. Saw some new. We got a pile of pictures to look at. One or two of the pictures I'd never seen before, and rifling through some of the photos of the Roswell crash, did come across some like zoomed in photos where people were like really zooming in and picking like details out. I didn't have time to really do a deep dive and figure out what they were talking about, but I'm hoping it does come up in the script and we can peel away at some point and see if we can't look at these photos. But let me plug my little phone in here. What is this?
I hear it was a classified weather balloon filled with swamp gas reflecting the light from Venus.
Well, yeah, of course, right? Yeah. That's what they want you to believe. But we ask the serious questions here. Hold on. One of our regular viewers will be making it tonight. Cool. So yeah, definitely not swamp gas. It definitely has nothing to do with the weather balloon. Maybe it does have something to do with the weather balloon. I don't know. I plan on like finding good detailed photos of weather balloons from the mid to late 1940s and doing like a super close inspection of the materials and then doing like a side by side with the photos we have from 1947 and seeing if they correlate. I think it's only fair. And, you know, we will cross that bridge when we get to it. Believe you me. So are y'all ready to get into the Roswell crash investigation? Because I am. Let's fire this thing up. Let's get some sounds going. Let me know if these background sounds get a little too loud. I've noticed they've been kind of quiet on the VODs, so I'm trying to turn it up a little bit, see what happens. It sounds loud at my end, but apparently it's not that loud on the VODs. We'll see what happens. So let's dive off into Act 1. Again, this is Season 3, Episode 1 of Beyond the Shadows podcast, and tonight we're talking about Roswell, debris, deception, and the birth of UFO secrecy. This is Act 1. To understand why Roswell became something larger than a single incident in the desert, you have to understand the moment it happened in. July of 1947 wasn't calm, it wasn't optimistic. It was a world still shaking from one catastrophe, while quietly bracing for the next. World War II had ended less than 2 years earlier, but the peace was uneasy and thin. Cities across Europe were still in rubble. Millions were displaced. The full horror of the concentration camps was only the beginning to settle into the public's consciousness. And looming over everything was a new kind of fear. One that didn't wear uniforms or march across borders. The atomic bomb had changed the rules of reality. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were no longer just cities, they were warnings. Humanity had crossed the line it could never step back over, and everyone knew it. Newspapers were filled with speculation about atomic futures, atomic wars, atomic annihilation. School children practiced duck and cover drills. Scientists who helped build the bomb warned that the next war wouldn't end with treaties, it would end with extinction. And behind the scenes, the Cold War was already forming its shape. The Soviet Union was no longer an ally, it was a rival. Intelligence agencies on both sides were scrambling to gather information, steal secrets, and stay one step ahead of the weapon that could erase cities in seconds. Espionage wasn't paranoia, it was policy. Surveillance wasn't optional, it was survival. And in 1947, secrecy wasn't just common, it was sacred. At the time, something else was happening, something strange, unexpected, and impossible to fully explain. The skies were getting crowded. And in June of 1947, just weeks before the Roswell incident, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying near Mount Rainier in Washington state when he saw something that didn't make sense. 9 objects moving at extraordinary speed, skipping across the sky in a way he later described as, quote, like a saucer skipping across water, end quote. Arnold wasn't a fringe figure. He wasn't chasing attention. He was a respected businessman with an experienced pilot. His report made headlines nationwide, and more importantly, it gave the public a new phrase. Flying saucers. Within days, sightings exploded across the country. Discs, lights, objects maneuvering in ways no known aircraft could replicate. Military bases, civilian pilots, police officers, ordinary citizens. The reports poured in faster than anyone could catalog them. This wasn't a slow cultural buildup, it was an ignition. The public wasn't laughing these stories off. Not yet. Not when the world had just learned that science could unleash the unimaginable. If atomic bombs were possible, why not something else? The U.S. military took the sightings seriously enough to start collecting reports immediately. Intelligence officers understood that not every unexplained object was a little green man, but they also understood something equally unsettling. If even one of these objects belonged to a foreign power, it would represent a catastrophic failure in national defense. And nowhere in the United States was that concern more concentrated than in southeastern New Mexico. Roswell, New Mexico wasn't important because of its population or its economy. It was important because of what sat just outside of town. Roswell Army Airfield. RAAF was not a minor installation. It was one of the most strategic, significant military bases in the country. Home to the 509th Bomb Group, the only unit in the world at the time capable of delivering atomic weapons. These were the men who had dropped the bombs on Japan. These were the crews trusted with humanity's most destructive capability. If you wanted to keep an eye on America's nuclear heartbeat, Roswell was the place. And that made the surrounding airspace some of the most sensitive on Earth. It also made secrecy non-negotiable. The officers stationed at Roswell weren't rookies. They were trained to identify foreign aircraft, classify intelligence, and respond quickly to anything that threatened national security. They lived in a world of protocols, codes, compartmentalized information. Mistakes weren't just embarrassing, they were dangerous. which is why what happened next still raises eyebrows nearly 80 years later. On a remote sheep ranch about 75 miles northwest of Roswell, a rancher named William Mack Brazel began noticing something odd scattered across his land. This wasn't the first time debris had shown up out there. Weather balloons, wreckage, scrap. It happened. Brazel wasn't naive. He knew the difference between ordinary trash and something unusual. But this was different. The debris field stretched across a wide area as if something had come apart while still in the air. Pieces were light but incredibly strong, thin metallic material that snapped back into shape when crumpled. Small beams with strange markings, fragments that didn't resemble any aircraft parts Brazel had ever seen. There was no engine, no propeller, no recognizable structure, just pieces. Brazel initially thought little of it, but as news of flying discs spread across the country, the timing began to bother him. After discussing it with neighbors, he decided to bring the debris to the attention of the local authorities. And that decision set off a chain of events that would permanently alter the relationship between the public and the government. The debris moved quickly from sheriff's office to Roswell Army Airfield, and once the military saw it, things escalated fast. This wasn't treated as junk, it wasn't dismissed. Officers took the material seriously enough to contact higher command immediately. Major Jesse Marcel entered the story here. Marcel wasn't a nobody. He was the intelligence officer for the 509th Bomb Group. His job was literally to identify and assess unusual materials, enemy technology, and potential threats. If something strange turned up, Marcel was the man responsible for figuring out what it was. He examined the debris personally. Decades later, Marcel would say something that never changed, no matter how many times he was asked. Quote, "It was not a weather balloon." End quote. There you go, Blip. Not a weather balloon. From the horse's mouth. He described materials that couldn't be cut, burned, or dented. Symbols on beams that looked nothing like English, Russian, or any known military markings. Components that made no aerodynamic sense. And crucially, Marcel stated that he handled actual weather balloons before, many times. Whatever this was, it wasn't that. The base commander, Colonel William Blanchard, was briefed, and then something happened that, in hindsight, feels almost surreal. On July 8 of 1947, Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release. It stated plainly that the military had recovered a, quote, flying disc. Not a balloon, not debris, a flying disc. This wasn't leaked information, this wasn't rumor, this was official military statement distributed to newspapers across the country, and it exploded. Headlines hit the wires nationwide. Radio broadcasts repeated the announcement, and for a brief window of time, the United States Army publicly acknowledged the recovery of a flying disc. Then, almost immediately, the story reversed. Higher command intervened. General Roger Ramey held a press conference in Fort Worth. The flying disc became a weather balloon. Photographs were released of showing Marcel posing with mundane debris. Reporters were told there was nothing unusual to see. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Because the speed, severity, and totality of the reversal didn't feel like a correction, it felt like containment. Why announce a flying disc at all? Why allow the press to release... Why allow the press release to go out? Why not quietly identify the debris and move on? Those questions don't require belief in extraterrestrials to matter. They require only an understanding of how the military handles sensitive information. They don't make mistakes like that casually. And as we move deeper into the Roswell story, we're going to strip away the myth, exaggeration, and decades of pop culture noise. We're going to look at what can be verified, what can be said, what was said, who said it, and just as importantly, what changed over time. Because before there were bodies, before there were threats, before there were cover stories layered on top of cover stories, there was a single moment when the United States military looked at something recovered from the desert and called it a flying disc. And that moment never really went away. Wow. Wowie, wowie. Act 1, everybody. What a way to start off Season 3. What an amazing, incredible way to start off Season 3. Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack already. Just about what we all kind of know. There was a crash. And initially, the United States military said that it was a flying disc. And then almost immediately, they backtracked. And it became a weather balloon. The government doesn't really do this. Or really hasn't since, rather. I can't think outside of this specific case any time that the military has ever put out a press release saying they did one thing and then be like, no, it was something else. It was something else. And then we've all seen the pictures. We've all heard the stories. We know about the timeline here. The photos taken with Marcel. Photos taken with the police officers. All of them huddled around that tarp laid down with all the pieces of debris on that. We're going to look at that here shortly. We're gonna dig into these things and see what we can pick apart. Because I think out of all those photos, this is probably some of our most reliable evidence. I don't see too much on how, we've got a pretty good head about ourselves here on this show, and we can generally see and tell when something has been altered or tampered with, especially when it comes to photographs, especially older photographs. And I think we're going to be able to see something if there is evidence of that tonight. So, wow, what an Act 1. What an Act 1. So yes, let me find this picture. Let me bring it up. The government did actually say, yes, we recovered a flying saucer. Let's bring this over here. Let's take a look at this. So here's some of the photos we got. These are the ones everybody's seen. About what you'd expect. Check this guy out. RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Literally used the words flying saucer. This was an official government press release, right? Can we zoom in on this? Make this a bit bigger so we can read this little article. What a great photograph, by the way. I'm trying to grab this without all the other elements coming through underneath. Roswell hardware man and wife reported disc seen. The intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell. Oh, here, let me move this mic over here. Army Airfield announced at noon today that the field has come into possession of a flying saucer. But according to information released by the Department over authority of Major J.A. Marcel, intelligence officer, the disc was recovered on a ranch in the Roswell vicinity after an unidentified rancher had notified Sheriff Geo Wilcox here that he found the instrument on his premises. Major Marcel had a detail from his department went out to the ranch and recovered the disc. It was stated after the intelligence office here had inspected the instrument, it was, and then this is all we got. That's the end of it. But still, like, what an amazing little piece of evidence to look at here. They literally said in a press release, we've got a flying saucer. I mean, it doesn't get any more cut and dry than that, right? So, I don't know. We don't necessarily have a standard, or we didn't have a standard then of, like, ethics in journalism like we do today. But I don't think that they would just print any old thing in the newspaper unless there was some sound piece of evidence behind it, right? You wouldn't just make a press release and say, we found a freaking UFO, and then, not mean it, right? The government doesn't just, well, I was going to say the government doesn't just say shit, does it? But I think we know they do now. It's funny when my chair felt low, because I was low. So yeah, we're dealing with not outside the norm of what we expect to see from the government here. I mean, by today's standards. But, in 1947, we were dealing with the espionage aspect of it. We were dealing with the secrecy part of it. The Cold War was about to swing into effect, and people were scared. I'm just looking at this. There's something that rubs me the wrong way about the debris, about the materials. I'm looking at him holding it. It looks like it's freaking light as paper. But they say something that always trips me up. They said that this material was metallic, lightweight but strong, and you could crumple the metal and let go and it would retain its shape. However, hear me out. However, if you look at the pictures, the pieces of the metal, the recovered materials here, have wrinkles in them. So how is it that they can have wrinkles from an impact, but not crumbling by hand? Question mark? Is that so far-fetched? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Something to think about. Something to think about. We got a little ways to go yet. So yeah, think about that for a little bit. Well, we're going to get in here into Act 2. Act 2 is the debris field, and we're going to talk about the debris field. All right?
I'm not saying it's space aliens, right? But it goes without saying it's fucking space aliens.
True. Let's get into it, Act 2, everybody. The debris field. The land northwest of Roswell is the kind of place where things disappear easily. Miles of open desert, rolling scrub. Oh, I'm about to sneeze again. Goodness. Every time. It's always at the beginning of an act. Ugh.
Bless you.
Thank you kindly. Be fortunate that I have a mute button on my mic, because I'm that guy that when I sneeze, it's like a shotgun blast. And I may or may not have blown a diaphragm in a previous mic. That's why I moved to this one instead of this sweet one. It's in the background back here. It's back there somewhere. Oh. Yeah. Big sneezer. Big sneezer here. If something fell from the sky out here It could scatter for hours without ever being noticed, unless it landed in exactly the wrong place. And in this case, it did. The Foster Ranch, sometimes called the Brazel Ranch, set roughly 75 miles from Roswell Army Airfield. It was isolated, quiet, unremarkable in the way most working ranches are. William Mack Brazel had been running livestock on that land for years. He knew what normal looked like, and more importantly, he knew what it didn't. Sometime in late June or early July of 1947, exact dates vary, and that matters later. Brazel discovered debris scattered across one of his grazing pastures, not piled, not concentrated, spread out in a long, irregular pattern, as if something had broken apart while still airborne. This wasn't a crash site. There was no crater, no scorch marks, no sign of impact with the ground. It looked like something had come apart above him and rained down in fragments. Brazel initially gathered some of the material and took it back to his house. He showed it to his children. They tried to burn it. They tried to cut it. They tried to bend it. It wouldn't cooperate. Some of the material was described as thin, metallic, foil-like, but unlike foil. It couldn't be torn or permanently creased. You could crumple it into a ball and let go, and it would return to its original shape. See? I'm having an issue with that. We'll get back to that. Other pieces were rigid but incredibly light, with a beam-like structure that appeared to have symbols or markings on them. No rivets, no screws, no wiring, nothing that matched known aircraft construction. And this is where later skepticism often skips ahead, but the early reactions matters. Brazel didn't run to the newspapers. He didn't assume aliens. In fact, he initially ignored the debris entirely. Ranch life doesn't stop for curiosities, and what changed his mind was the news. As reports of flying discs began flooding newspapers and radio broadcasts across the country, Brazel started connecting dots. He'd never seen anything like this before, and suddenly the entire nation was talking about strange objects in the sky. And that's when he decided to report it. Brazel went to the Chaves County Sheriff's Office in Roswell and spoke with Sheriff George Wilcox. Wilcox took one look at the material and contacted Roswell Army Airfield. And from that moment on, control of the situation shifted completely. The military didn't send a casual patrol. They sent intelligence. Major Jesse Marcel and Counterintelligence Corps Agent Sheridan Cavett were dispatched to the ranch to examine the debris firsthand. Marcel would later say that once he saw the extent of the field, it was immediately clear that this wasn't conventional wreckage. The debris wasn't localized. It stretched for thousands of feet. Marcel described it as if something had exploded silently in the sky, distributing fragments over a wide area. They collected what they could and loaded it into military vehicles. Here's a detail that often gets overlooked. Marcel took some debris home with him that night. Not as a souvenir, but he showed it to his wife and son. His son, Jesse Marcel Jr., would later describe holding pieces of material he'd never seen before. Material that felt metallic but light as balsa wood, with strange markings etched into the thin beams. And that night matters because it happened before the press release, before the retraction, before the story calcified into a weather balloon. At this stage, no one was controlling the narrative yet. And the next day, the debris was flown to Fort Worth for further analysis, and this is where the story takes its first sharp turn. I'm gonna drink on that one. Here comes the bullshit. A little something to soften the blow. At Roswell Army Airfield, Colonel William Blanchard made a decision that still defies easy explanation. He authorized the release of a press statement. The wording was direct. It didn't hedge, it didn't speculate. The Army Airfield had recovered a flying disc. This wasn't a confused reporter's interpretation, it came from the base itself. Public Information Officer Walter Haught distributed it to the local press, where it was immediately picked up by National Wire Services. And for a brief moment, the United States military appeared to confirm what millions of Americans were already wondering. something unknown had been recovered. Then the machinery of damage control engaged. By the time Major Marcel reached Fort Worth, the tone had changed completely. General Roger Ramey took charge. Marcel was ordered to pose for photographs with debris that looked nothing like what he recovered. Tin foil, wooden sticks, rubber remnants. Marcel complied, but he never stopped insisting that what was shown to the press was not what he brought in. Decades later, he would say the material had been switched. That claim is often dismissed as a memory distortion, but it introduces a critical problem. If the original debris was ordinary, why replace it at all? The official explanation that would eventually emerge decades later centered on Project Mogul, a classified balloon program designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. Mogul used high-altitude balloons with radar I screwed that whole sentence up. Mogul used high-altitude balloons with radar targets made of foil and sticks. On paper, it seemed plausible, but the timeline didn't line up entirely. Mogul was so secret in 1947 that most personnel at Roswell wouldn't have known about it, which raises an obvious question. Why announce a flying disc instead of staying silent? Why not simply classify the debris immediately? Instead, the military acknowledged it publicly and scrambled to walk it back. The debris field itself remains one of the strongest foundations of the Roswell case, precisely because it doesn't rely on secondhand rumors or late-breaking testimony. It involves named individuals, physical material, documented actions taken by military intelligence. Something came apart in the air. It left behind material that didn't behave like conventional debris. It prompted a base commander to authorize an extraordinary press release, and it forced higher command to step in and reverse the story within hours. Whatever fell near Roswell, the reaction to it was not routine. And as we move into the next phase of the story, the consequences of that reaction began to ripple outward into intimidation, silence, and claims that go far beyond scattered debris. Because if Act 2 was about what was found, Act 3 is about what the government decided to say and what it decided to bury. Facts. Okay, so this kind of puts the nail in the coffin about my initial complaint about the photos. Let me see if I can get this picture full screen. Late. I got so much stuff on this computer. Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me open that. I don't know why. Super weird. Okay. Let's go back to this. I want to nitpick. I want to poke the shit. I want to... Something didn't jive here with me, alright? Let's zoom in on this. Let's do like a mega zoom. Yeah, he wasn't joking. There's like pieces of wood here. Alright, so this is why... the information didn't jive with me. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing like pieces of balsa here. Look right there. That's a round piece of dowel balsa, like similar to what you'd see in kite making. Also, like older, like mid to early 1940s model airplanes would be made out of this stuff. Balsa is very light. Kites, a very popular material for building kites because it's feather light. Balsa has lots and lots of pores. It's super light. The Wright brothers, their entire plane from their first flight was made out of balsa wood. So it only stands to reason that anything that would fly in the sky would be made out of balsa. Yeah, this really just looks like paper-backed aluminum foil. I wonder if in 1947 they had that. Let's find out. I want to find out now. Let's start nitpicking a little bit. In 1947, did they have paper-backed aluminum? No, it wouldn't be aluminum foil because I don't think aluminum was found back then. Tin foil. Yes, they had paper-backed foil in 1947, but it was also often still called tin foil, even as aluminum foil like Reynolds wrap became widely available for household use, replacing other thicker tin foil due to the aluminum's better properties for cooking and wrapping. So let's find an image of that. There's immediately images of the Roswell crash. Oh, come on. How do we word this? 1947 paperback tinfoil? I'm trying to find an image of it. Nobody has freaking nobody has any of it. Huh. So we do have some paper-backed aluminum foil, but I'm not seeing... Like, come on, really? Somebody show me vintage aluminum foil. Somebody show me a vintage tin foil. Nobody has an image of it? So here's 1950s. I got the box, but not the stuff that's inside. What the hell? Why can't I find an image of vintage aluminum foil? That's a little weird, right? Am I grasping at straws here? Is that weird? Let me show you what I see. This is weird to me.
They've scrubbed it from the internet because that's what UFOs are actually made of.
I'm telling you, it's a little weird. It is a little weird. Like, I can't even find images. This is the only image of paper-backed tinfoil I could find. That's as close as I can get, even new stuff. It seems a little weird, right? Geez, like, I remember like growing up and seeing like, so I grew up in Detroit, and lots of made-to-order food in Detroit. I remember there was a burrito place and a bakery that you could go and they would make your food for you right on the spot. And I mean, like, you're not going to get like baked foods on the spot, but you know, they'd dress it up for you on the spot. And I remember getting like paper-backed aluminum foil with my stuff because it was cheap and it held together better than aluminum foil, but it held in the heat. So this is what we would see like wrapped around a burrito or a fresh loaf of bread. I couldn't tell you the last time I've seen it. It had to have been 25 plus years ago. It's just weird. Very weird. Like, but, coming back to this, this does look surprisingly similar to what he's got here. Except it's white paper. And I don't know, it's just weird. But okay, so this was the problem I had with it, was I thought it was strange that they had this material that you could crumple with your hands and let it go and it would spring back to shape. But these pictures had this metallic stuff here has wrinkles and crinkles in it, like it's been crushed and laid flat, like somebody just smoothed it out with their hands. This is what aluminum foil would look like if you crumpled it and smoothed it out. How is this the definition of material that when you crumple it, it lays out flat back to the shape it was in? That didn't make sense to me, but if you remember, towards the end of Here Back 2, they were talking about how they made Marcel go back and take pictures with a second set of materials that he said wasn't the same as what he saw on the ranch. And he kept saying, this isn't the right stuff, this isn't the right stuff. But they told him, they ordered him to take photos with the stuff, right? Yeah, sorry, I need to fix this before I forget. Yeah, there we go. So, that clears up my little hiccup with what I was thinking with the why that material looks crumbled, because this wasn't the stuff that he's seen on the ranch, the stuff that sprang back when he crumpled it and let go. All right, before we get into Act 3, I'm going to peel away and use the restroom. All right? Don't go anywhere. We're going to get into Act 3 when I get back. It's the retraction and the cover story section of this investigation. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back, folks. Initially attributed to robbery or drug-related violence, but the condition of the body suggested something else. The Freetown Fall River State Forest covers nearly 5,000 acres of rugged terrain. Dense pines, granite outcroppings, and isolated trails. It's beautiful in daylight, but when the sun goes down, it becomes something else. Rangers have described finding makeshift altars, candles, animal bones, and symbols carved into trees. Others are harder to explain. The forest notoriety dates back to the 1970s, where locals began reporting ritualistic gatherings in the woods. Some involved fire circles and chanting, or others left behind mutilated animals, goats, dogs, and deer, laid out in geometric patterns. While no definitive group was ever identified, the pattern of activity suggests organized ritual behavior. And in 1978, police discovered 2 men brutally murdered near the forest. Their deaths were initially attributed to robbery or drug-related violence, but the condition of the body suggested something else. According to archived reports in the Fall River Herald News, the victims were found partially dismembered, surrounded by traces of candle wax and crude wooden symbols. Although never conclusively linked to satanic or cult activity, investigators noted similarities between the crime scene and later ritual cases that would plague the region in the upcoming years. So there's a Bigfoot. It's up here in Massachusetts in the United States. So this is our Bridgewater Triangle. This is very near Providence, very near where the foundation of the United States came from. All right, so we're going to get down to the official involvement from the 1970s, where the police are getting involved in some of the cryptids being seen around the Bridgewater Triangle. So police didn't treat the reports as folklore, and in 1970, the Bridgewater Police Department responded to multiple calls of residents claiming a, quote, giant bear was in their yards. Officers armed with rifles searched the area but found nothing. And according to a 1970 report archived at the Bridgewater Historical Society, One officer wrote, quote, "Tracks were seen but lost in the underbrush. Whatever was out there was big enough to shake the brush when it moved." I'm back. Hello, friends. I hope your break was as good as mine. Oh, goodness. Lots of stairs, lots of steps. Happy New Year beer. Let's go. This video is not sponsored by Voodoo Ranger, but if they wanted to, I would be open to it. Okay. Let's get into Act 3. Alright. So Act 1 was the initial story, a little bit of build-up. Act 2 was the debris field, and Act 3 is about the retraction and the cover story. We got a lot to unpack here. This is where things start to get a little muddled. This is where storylines start to cross. This is where people's recollection of what they understand as the concept and the ideas behind the Roswell, New Mexico incident, what they think is right, but might not be actually correct. It might be a cover. But we're going to get into that. I need to, geez, let me see if I can move this cable. Hold on. I'm going to try really hard to do this and not unplug my camera. Oh, please don't unplug. It's such a pain in the ass to fix it once it does. Awesome. We didn't unplug anything. I've been trying to read this damn script through a loop in my charging cord. All right. Let's get into Act 3, everybody. Act 3, this is the retraction and the cover story. So if the Roswell story had ended with strange debris in the desert, it would be a historical footnote. Curious, maybe even unsettling, but manageable. What transformed it into something far more enduring was what happened next. The speed, the precision, and the totality of the reversal. The morning of July 8th of 1947, America woke up to headlines announcing that the Army captured a flying disc. Newspapers across the country ran variations of the same story, all tracing back to the Roswell Army airfield. Radio broadcasters repeated it. For a few brief hours, the idea that the military recovered something unknown was not a conspiracy, it was official. But by the end of that same day, it was gone. The retraction didn't come from Roswell, it came from Fort Worth. General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force, stepped in and took control of the narrative. At a press conference, he calmly explained that the so-called flying disc was nothing more than the remains of a weather balloon. Reporters were shown debris, tinfoil, rubber, wooden sticks, and a radar reflector. Major Jesse Marcel stood beside it, posing for photographs, and said nothing. Did we look at his face? What was his facial expression in these pictures? I didn't even look. I was so focused on like the tinfoily stuff. I want to see this guy's face. Yeah, he doesn't look happy about it, right? See, like this picture here, I feel like this is where he was saying, this isn't the stuff I saw. That's the face I'm getting. This isn't it. This isn't the stuff. It is a little weird. Yeah, look, he's almost laughing in that picture. Huh. Yeah, a little weird. A little weird. The message was clear. There had been a misunderstanding. Case closed. Except the explanation didn't just contradict the press release, it contradicted the behavior that came before it. Weather balloons were not exotic in 1947. They were launched regularly. recovered frequently and recognized easily by military personnel. Roswell Army Airfield sat under constant balloon traffic. If the debris had been identifiable at a glance, there would have been no reason to escalate it through intelligence channels. The reason to involve the base commander, and certainly no reason to issue public statement about a flying disc. Corrections happened, but this wasn't framed as a correction, it was framed as a replacement. The original story vanished completely, treated as if it had never existed. For Major Marcel, the public silence was mandatory. Behind the scenes, however, his account had never changed. He would later say that he was ordered to remain quiet, to cooperate with the revised explanation. The debris he handled in Fort Worth, he insisted, was not what he recovered from the ranch. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If the debris was ordinary, why the need for the substitution? The Air Force's long-term answer to that question would arrive decades later. In 1994, after renewed public pressure and a congressional inquiry, the U.S. Air Force released a report stating that the Roswell incident involved Project Mogul, a classified array of high-altitude balloons designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The report claimed that the unusual materials, the confusion, and the secrecy could all be explained by the project's classified nature at the time. On the surface, it sounded reasonable. But the more closely the explanation was examined, the more cracks appeared. Project Mogul was classified, but not unknown to every officer. It was a research project, not a crash recovery scenario. Its debris, while unfamiliar to civilians, should not have baffled trained intelligence officers long enough to produce a flying disc press release. And critically, the Mogul explanation did not exist in 1947. It was introduced nearly 50 years later. And before that, the story changed multiple times. First it was a weather balloon. And then it was a Rowan radar target. Then it was Project Mogul. Each explanation attempted to close the gap left by the one before. But each also acknowledged implicitly that the original explanation had been insufficient. And explanations that evolve retroactively tend to raise suspicion and not erase it. Even more troubling was the way witnesses described the aftermath. Brazel himself gave interviews that sounded rehearsed. He downplayed the debris, contradicted earlier descriptions, and emphasized how ordinary it all was. Shortly after speaking to the military, he reportedly disappeared from public view for several days. When he re-emerged, the tone of his story had changed. That pattern would repeat itself again and again as more witnesses came forward in later years. People described being warned, told to stay quiet, reminded of national security, and in some cases threatened. The official stance was that nothing extraordinary had occurred, but extraordinary efforts seemed to have gone into making sure everyone agreed with that stance. The Roswell incident didn't just introduce the idea of UFOs to the public imagination, it introduced something else, something arguably more consequential. The possibility that the government would lie to preserve control. Not speculate, not withhold information, but lie. That idea took root in 1947 and never left. Every contradictory statement, every revised explanation, every refusal to release documents reinforced the same underlying concern. If the truth was harmless, why bury it so aggressively? And by the end of Act 3, Roswell had transformed from an event into a pattern. A rapid acknowledgement, an immediate reversal, a long silence, and an explanation that kept changing as pressure increased. Which brings us to the most controversial phase of the story. Because while debris can be explained away, dismissed, or reclassified, people are much harder to erase. Alright, so let's do some digging. I want to see a 1947 weather balloon. Furthermore, I want to see what it was made out of. All right. 1947 weather balloon, especially those used in secret projects like Mogul, was made from polyethylene plastic, a more advanced, lighter, and durable material than older rubber. Though some reports mentioned rubberized fabric, from the tinfoil and through paper from the general craze, but polyethylene was key for high altitude performance. Polyethylene, the plastic, was revolutionary, while working well in cold, resisting ozone, and being lighter and cheaper than rubber for large high altitude balloons. Rubberized fabric, rubber strips, some earlier standard balloons used natural or synthetic rubber, but polyethylene quickly became preferred for advanced projects. What does it say here? Tinfoil and paper. Debris from some 1947 incidents, I think we know which we're talking about here, included tinfoil and paper, likely from radar reflectors or instrument packaging, not the main balloon envelope. Okay. So let's see an image of oh, here. I'm sorry. I was thinking I was sharing my freaking... Yeah. My bad. Let's check this guy out. I mean, nothing in that even looks remotely metallic. Oh, here we go. I want to know what this looks like up close. This bit here. Because I feel like that's important. I really do. Okay, now that looks like the debris field. Or the debris in the photos, but as we determined earlier, the stuff that he posed with for those photos were not the same thing that he saw on the ranch the night of the incident. So, begs the question, how do we get people convinced that we're looking at a weather balloon? I could see the government taking one of these and just smashing it, crushing it, destroying it, and then giving pieces and saying, hey, this is it. Are you ready for the real kicker? Here's what really gets me. Why do we not have pieces of this balloon with the metallic looking stuff in the Roswell photos? You would figure, right? I mean, this piece of rubber, this polyethylene plastic rubber, whatever you want to call it, you would figure this would be way, way bigger than the metallic stuff. And let's really look at this. Let's look at this. Do you think there's enough material in this shape to stretch over thousands of feet of desert? I don't. Not in the big pieces we looked at earlier. Absolutely not. I don't, I don't see it. I really don't. It's interesting. I mean, that could be no more than, what, 2.5 foot, 3 foot tall? Now, no, I don't agree with it. I'm not saying that this photo isn't pictures of pieces from that weather balloon. I think that's legit. I think that these photos are taken of a trashed weather balloon that they used as a prop. There is not enough material here to be... Yeah, look, this is not enough material to stretch over thousands of yards, or thousands of feet. No way. No way. I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. I am not convinced. Not in the least. I'm just... It almost feels like... They said, what do we got that's metallic? That... Yeah, here we go. Look at this. Look, yeah, this is the balloon being launched. There's no way that's going to stretch over thousands of feet of desert. No way. Absolutely no way. I'm dumb, but I am not that dumb. I don't doubt that these were used. I just doubt that this is what was found in Roswell. It's almost like they said, what can we give them that is metallic and was in the sky, and we could say crashed. Also, show of hands, who's ever seen a weather balloon pop? I have. Let me see if I can find a video of it. Government weather balloon. Oop, I almost spelled pooping. Is this the one I'm looking for? All right. This is it. This is what I want to show you. And there's a reason I want to show you this. All right, we got no audio. This says a 00OOZ weather balloon at an altitude of 18 miles launched by National Weather Services in Blacksburg, Virginia. So the white circle you're seeing here is the balloon, the rubber plastic part. Like, you can barely see right there. This is the metallic part that they're saying is what stretched over thousands of miles, or thousands of feet. Okay, look at that. That balloon exploded. You see, so the weight of the piece that's hanging down is right here. It's still attached by strings. It is dragging down a good piece of the balloon with it. All right? I don't doubt that these debris could stretch over thousands of feet. But we know from looking at the pictures that the balloon part of it was non-metallic. It was a polyethylene plastic. They've already said it. I'm not seeing any pieces of the capsule, the part that's hanging down below, flying away. I'm fairly confident that when it hits the ground, that thing's going to come down in one piece. I'm fairly confident. It's going to crumple when it hits the ground, but it's going to come down in one piece. Absolutely. I've seen weather balloons explode. Weather balloons don't make a mess like that, man. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Let's move on. Let's move on, everybody. Let's move on to Act 4. I get excited. I'm sorry, but they're feeding us information that they want us to believe. And literally in the last hour and 18 minutes, we've been able to disprove this information with just a couple Google searches. If you think I'm wrong, say something in chat. Let's talk about it. Real easy. We'll talk all the way about it. We'll talk until I'm blue in the face about it. I don't care. The metallic pieces found in the desert or not a weather balloon. No way. What did you say earlier, Blip? A classified weather balloon filled with swamp gas reflecting the light from Venus. Was that Men in Black? Yeah, that was Men in Black, right? Right? Getting senile in my old age? Anyway, I see we got a few people watching on YouTube. Welcome in people on YouTube. Nobody on Facebook watching tonight, I guess. That's fine. We had one person pop in. Wait, did we have a comment? Did we get a comment on one of our live videos? Hold on. Total comments. Show me the comment. 1 minute viewed on Facebook. Oh no, the comment is my default. My live thing. I'm about to sneeze again. Oh my gosh. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So yeah. The debris was not a weather balloon filled with swamp gas reflecting off of Venus. Come on now. Come on, Blip.
Aliens.
That's what it is.
Aliens.
I'm not saying it's space aliens, right? But it goes without saying it's fucking space aliens.
All right, everybody. Act 4. Bodies, bases, and broken silence. Act 4, everybody. Act 4.
I wasn't directly quoting MIB, but maybe that's where I got it from.
I think that is where it came from. To be honest with you, I'm pretty sure. Hold on. Now I gotta know. Men in Black quote about weather balloons. Classic Men in Black quote about weather balloons delivered by Agent K, Tommy Lee Jones, to a witness explains away an alien sighting as swamp gas from a weather balloon was trapped in a thermal pocket and reflected in the light from Venus. Close enough. Hey, you know, good job, good job. That was good enough. I'll take it. That's a win. That's a win. Good job. Proud of you. I'm proud of you. So for years, Roswell could be argued as a case of misidentification, secrecy, and Cold War paranoia. Strange debris, possible. A botched press release, embarrassing but survivable. But as time passed, the story didn't stabilize, it escalated. And the escalation always pointed in the same direction. Not just wreckage. Bodies. The first thing to understand about the bodies narrative is that it didn't emerge all at once. It surfaced slowly in fragments from different people at different times, many of whom had nothing to gain by speaking out, and in some cases quite a bit to lose. One of the earliest and most controversial figures in this phase of the Roswell story was a man named Glenn Dennis. Dennis was a young mortician in 1947 working at Ballard Funeral Home in Roswell. According to his later testimony, he received unusual calls from the base around the time of the crash. Military personnel asked about small, child-sized coffins. They asked about preservation techniques for bodies that had been exposed to the elements, but not damaged in ways consistent with a plane crash. I think there's a video of this. Hold on. Hold on. Glenn Dennis. Does anybody remember the show Sightings? Very popular, late 80s, early 90s, right about the time. Very popular about the same time as Unsolved Mysteries. Oh, come on. Where's it at? Hold on. I gotta find this now. It's killing me now.
Probably 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks. Could have been a little longer, but I know it was at least 2 weeks. I got a letter at much feeling on it, but inside of the letter, it was just a note. She said, I don't have time to write. I will write later. This is my APO number. And that was the extent of it. So then I wrote back to her and asked her more or less how she was feeling and why the sudden transfer, and then I hoped that she was in a lot of trouble. She said, yes, we would like to know. So that's when I explained to him that we would have the vats that we would fill up with and he said,
Hold on. It's here. It's here somewhere. I remember this interview.
and he said, no, he said,
Well, come on, Mike, man. Glenn Dennis. I hate to type this in. Child-sized coffins. Come on. It was here. I just saw it. Maybe it was the sighting show. All right, pause that. So I've pulled up the episode of Sightings. I'm trying not to show it because I'm really, really trying not to get dinged. I love Sightings. If y'all are a fan of this podcast, you really need to go back and watch Sightings. It was so good.
Edges at about a 45-degree angle. The black sky was a white object.
Nope, not him. Come on, where's he at? Is that him?
Weather balloon story had been fabricated to hide the truth. He told Walter Hawk there really was a saucer crash.
He made statements to the effect that it was nothing of this world. It couldn't be bent, torn.
Nope, we already know that part. Come on, where's this at? Where's Glenn Dennis? I could spend an hour digging through this because this is an hour-long show. Jeez, I'm gonna find it. Next week we're gonna play it because, damn it, they interviewed this guy for Sightings. I know they did because I watch this show all the damn time. But they interviewed Glenn Dennis, and he remembers being contacted by the military asking for child-sized coffins because they recovered bodies that were exposed to the elements. I'm going to find this video, and I'm going to bring it back next week. So make sure you're here next week, and we'll talk about it. At first, Dennis thought it was a joke. And then he spoke with a nurse stationed at the base. According to Dennis, the nurse told him she had assisted in examining bodies recovered from a crash site. They were small, not human. Their heads were large, their bodies frail, and their features unlike anything she had seen before. She described intense odors, severe injuries, and military personnel guarding the area. Shortly after this conversation, the nurse was allegedly transferred. Dennis claimed he was later warned to stay quiet. The nurse was never officially identified, and that absence has been used to dismiss the story entirely, but the pattern, witnesses emerging, being discredited, and then disappearing, would later become a familiar one in the Roswell incident. And Dennis wasn't alone. Over the years, multiple individuals came forward claiming knowledge of bodies recovered from a secondary crash site. Secondary. Some said there were multiple debris fields. Others claimed the main wreckage and bodies were transported to different locations under heavy scrutiny. One recurring detail stands out, the idea that the craft did not simply crash, it broke apart in stages, with a more intact section landing miles away. If true, it would explain the lack of a crater, the scattered debris, and the reports of recovery operations that went far beyond what was required for a balloon. Several witnesses described small humanoid figures, roughly 4 feet tall, thin limbs, oversized heads, gray or tan skin, no visible hair, and minimal facial features. Descriptions that would later become archetypal with the alien greys. But in 1947, there was no template for this imagery. No popular media saturation, no established gray alien stereotypes. And that matters. Hold on. Betty in Barney Hill. What year was that? 1961. Okay. So Betty and Barney Hill incident, we talked about it back at season 1, was one of the first recorded incidents outside of the Roswell incident that described explicitly alien greys. Short, small limbs, big heads, large black eyes. So the first, when it comes to being the first to explain what they saw, the first person is never really believed, but the second person, okay, now we've got a little bit of a foundation to build on. So by the time the Betty and Barney Hill incident happened, we're talking 15 years plus after the Roswell incident. Alien greys weren't explicitly described, nothing in the news, so there was nothing to lend authenticity to the idea of alien greys. Oh, well, that's just hearsay. You can't say that there's these little small, big head, gray skinned things in the desert. But when Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, they explicitly described alien greys. And unofficially, there was a correlation drawn from the Betty and Barney Hill incident to the Roswell crash, because now we have 2 recorded instances completely isolated from one another. And so, where did Betty and Barney Hill get the idea for alien greys? It didn't come from anywhere, because officially this dialogue, this throw-about of words of little short extraterrestrials didn't exist at the time. This is stuff that only came in years and years later, after the Betty and Barney Hill incident. So you got to think, back then we didn't have internet. We didn't, communication came through the news. It came through the radio. If nobody was talking about alien greys in 1947, and Betty and Barney Hill in 1951 described alien greys, we're already looking at a major foundational support in the belief structure and the proof of alien greys. Sorry, rambling again. Let's get back into it. But in 1947, there was no template for this imagery. No popular media saturation, no established gray alien stereotype. And that matters. It suggests that if these stories were invented, they were invented independently and before such descriptions were culturally reinforced. Equally troubling were claims about what happened afterward. Witnesses described base lockdowns, armed guards, restricted areas, rapid transportation of materials under cover of night. Some said they were escorted away from sites they worked at for years, told to never speak of what they'd seen. Others claimed they were threatened directly, not with vague warnings, but with explicit statements about their safety and the safety of their families. Skeptics rightly point out that memory is unreliable, especially decades later, and that's true. But Roswell's problem isn't that 1 or 2 people make extraordinary claims, it's that the claims cluster. They overlap in structure, if not in detail. Different people from different walks of life describing the same atmosphere of urgency, secrecy, and fear. Then there are the military explanations. In 1997, the Air Force released a follow-up report attempting to address the, quote, body claims. The explanation was that witnesses had likely misremembered anthropomorphic test dummies used in high-altitude experiments during the 1950s. There was just one problem. The dummies weren't used in 1947. The dates didn't line up. The programs didn't overlap, and that explanation required witnesses to confuse events separated by years, sometimes nearly a decade. The solution felt less like clarification and more like retrofitting. And what makes Act 4 so unsettling isn't whether every claim is true, it's the sheer effort applied to neutralize them. Every time testimony emerged, it was met with an explanation that arrived late, shifted over time, and failed to fully account for the original statements. And all of it circles back to one unavoidable question. If nothing extraordinary happened, why did so many people remember being afraid? Why did careers end quietly? Why did witnesses change their stories? Why did official explanations evolve instead of settling? Roswell became more than a crash. It became a warning, spoken and unspoken, about where the boundaries of acceptable knowledge were. And the closer witnesses claimed they got to the truth, the harder those boundaries pushed back. So here, by the end of Act 4, Roswell is no longer just about what fell from the sky, it's about what happened afterward. About the silence enforced, stories erased, and fear used as a tool. Which brings us to the final act, Act 5. Because even if you dismiss the bodies, the intimidation, the cover stories, you still have to explain why Roswell refuses to die. Indeed. I get worked up, sorry. Feeling my oats here. Second wind after that bathroom break. Alright. So, Act 4. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in. Not gonna lie. The body story is not very heavily known. And the problem we run into with the body story is we're dealing with unknown variables. Hearsay. It's hard to corroborate a story if all you have is hearsay. You dig? You dig? Just a second. I'm going to check. I gotta check Facebook right quick. I'm trying to make sure that this is actually streaming. Oh yeah, cool. Showing we're live. Awesome. One comment. Oh no, it's me. Hey, cool. We're up 16 views on Facebook. Awesome. People are looking. That's what we wanted. The problem we run into with the body story is it's all hearsay. Now, there have been lots of people that have come forward with quote-unquote evidence of the Roswell crash and bodies. Unofficially, the story goes that there were 4 or 5 bodies, and one was alive. Unofficially, that extraterrestrial is still alive. We don't know where it's being held. Probably somewhere around Area 51. Groom Lake, whatever you want to call it. We can go with the story from Independence Day, where they said that the crash in Roswell was the extraterrestrials from Independence Day. And if you remember, towards middle to the end of that movie, they had one that was still alive. And remember, it was in a tube, and the other ones were dead, and they were in the tubes. So, what is that figure of speech about fiction imitating life? I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. But a good way to veil secrecy in everyday life would be to hide it in public. So, like, makes you wonder why the Men in Black movie was so popular, So if people are worried about the Men in Black, well, let's make a comedy movie about it. And now anytime anybody says anything about Men in Black, they're going to, the Will Smith movie, that was so funny. Well, it immediately deflects your brain. And it makes you think of something other than what they want you to think. I don't know. I'm rambling again. But no. Independence Day, so that was 92? 94? This was the same year that the government did that press release saying, that was a weather balloon, and it was Project Mogul. Awfully convenient that Independence Day came out, within a year. And they also kind of talk about the crash in Roswell, but they veil it in the lens of a movie. Maybe I'm grasping at straws. I don't know, but something to think about. Something to freaking think about. We're going to get into Act 5 now. Before I ramble too much more, Act 5, the legacy, and why Roswell still matters. Act 5, everybody. Act 5. So by the time the last witness statements surfaced and the final Air Force reports were released, Roswell should have been finished. Closed file. Solved mystery. Another strange footnote in a chaotic post-war world. Instead, it became the foundation, not just for UFO mythology, but for something deeper and more enduring. The idea that there are limits to what the public is allowed to know, and that those limits are enforced not by accident but by design. And what makes Roswell different from thousands of other unexplained sightings is not the debris, it's not the alleged bodies, it's the paper trail. The official statements, the reversal, the evolving explanations. In 1947, the military said it recovered a flying disc. Then it didn't. Then it was a balloon. Then it was a radar target. Then it was Project Mogul. Then it was test dummies. Each explanation arrived when the previous one became insufficient. Each required the public to accept that earlier statements made by trained officers and formal institutions were simply misunderstandings. And yet the misunderstandings always seemed to point in the same direction. Secrecy. When the Air Force released its 1994 and 1997 reports, the intent was clear. Close the case permanently. Address every claim, neutralize every rumor, and reassert control over the narrative. But something unexpected happened. The reports didn't reduce public interest, they intensified it. Because of instead in providing clarity, they highlighted inconsistencies, dates that didn't align, technologies that didn't exist yet, witnesses whose memories couldn't be cleanly explained away. The reports answered questions that many people hadn't even asked, while sidestepping the ones they had. Roswell stopped being about aliens versus balloons and became about credibility. If the government could get Roswell wrong or lie about it, what else might it have misinterpreted? That question echoed forward in every major UFO case that followed. Rendlesham Forest, the Phoenix Lights, the Nimitz encounter. Each new incident was filtered through the same lens first ground into place in 1947. Don't trust the first explanation. Don't expect transparency. Watch for revisions. Roswell also reshaped culture. Before 1947, stories of strange objects in the skies existed, but they weren't cohesive. After Roswell, they became organized. Patterns formed. Language solidified. Flying saucers evolved into UFOs, then UAPs. Government secrecy became an assumed component of the phenomena. Even skeptics adopted Roswell as a reference point, not because they believed it, but because it demanded explanation. And perhaps most importantly, Roswell introduced the idea that disclosure isn't a moment, it's a process. A slow release of information shaped by pressure, denial, and time. A process where the truth, wherever it may be, is filtered through layers of classification and institutional self-preservation. In recent years, that idea has gained new relevance. Congressional hearings, whistleblower testimonies, official acknowledgments that the unexplained objects exist and outperform known technology. None of that is started in a vacuum. It started in a desert with a press release that never should have happened, and that may be Roswell's true legacy. Not proof of extraterrestrial life, not definitive evidence of a crash, but the moment when the public realized that the official answers could not be taken at face value. Roswell endures because it sits at the intersection of power, fear, and uncertainty. Because it resists closure. Because every attempt to bury it only deepens its shadow. Whatever came down near Roswell in 1947 changed something fundamental. It changed how we question authority. It changed how we interpret the unknown, and it changed how far we're willing to look beyond the explanations we're given. And until every contradiction is resolved, until every revision finally stops, Roswell will remain what it has always been. Not a solved mystery, but an open wound. All right. So we've reached the end of Act 5. What are we thinking? Do we think this is really paranormal? Do we think this is all a hoax? Was it really a weather balloon? Was it a plane? Was it a spy? Okay, so let's compare to today. So within the last year, we've had observation balloons float into the United States border. We immediately picked it up, and it was immediately shot down. All right. How could anything that we don't recognize fly that far into American airspace without being noticed? Sure, 1947, I get it. But when I think about thousands of feet of debris, I think about that video we saw of the weather balloon exploding, the rubber part of it exploding. Sure, we might get thousands of feet of debris, but it's not going to be metallic. It's not going to act the way that they said it acted. And there are other first-hand accounts that we didn't talk about.
I hold the phenomena as a whole in fairly high confidence, so I would find it extremely ironic if Roswell itself was prosaic.
Okay. I can live with that. Here's what I think. Think back in your life to something that you do well today. Say for instance, building computers. I'm really good at building computers. I've built many in my lifetime. But let me think back to the first time I built a computer. And I ran into something I didn't quite expect happened. Oh, well, that didn't happen correctly. How do I fix it? What do I do to fix this? How can I change my future interpretations of this situation to make this specific error not occur again? All right? Bear with me. So the second time I come around to building a computer, I catch that thing before it happens. I know how to prepare myself for that situation. Ooh, I'm not going to accidentally forget to snap the RAM all the way in. Or I'm not going to forget my I/O shroud when I mount my motherboard, which has happened. I may or may not have a computer in this room that doesn't have an I/O shroud because I don't want to take the motherboard out. But what I'm getting at, what if this was the government's first encounter with something extraterrestrial? And they tried to bullshit their way through dealing with it. And at first they were like, oh yeah, well, yeah, this is a flying, so we found a flying saucer, no big deal. And then somebody with a little more sense came along and said, no, we can't say that publicly. Change it. And so from that point forward, we know not to say right out of the gate, yeah, we found a flying saucer, or we found a UFO, or we found extraterrestrials. It immediately becomes a deny tactic. Because the Roswell incident could have very well been the United States government's first time interacting with a crash. They don't know what to do. On paper, they've done it, right? But there's always something, like me building my first computer. On paper, I know how to do it. But when I really got in there and started doing it, oh, I forgot to snap the RAM in all the way. Oh, I forgot to put the I/O shield in. Next time I'll know. Same thing with the government. This is the first time on paper we know how to deal with extraterrestrials, but it's happened. Oh, well, yeah, let's go ahead and say it's flying saucer. Oh, but next time, I'm not going to come out straight and say it's a flying saucer. You see what I'm getting at? Am I rambling too much? This was the United States government's first time really dealing with the extraterrestrial concept. They weren't quite sure what the hell they were doing. And let's be honest, if the government was to come out and say tomorrow, yeah, extraterrestrials exist, UFOs are real, they've been landing here since the 1947, it would cause such a calamity in society, because then you got to think about what's going to happen to world religion. What's going to happen to society? Are people going to panic? Are people going to start rioting? Are they going to start looting? Will society collapse? Will government make it through this? There's so many things, because then you deal with, well, what if extraterrestrials were the ones that planted us here on the planet? There goes the concept of God out the window. How many people in the world are Christians today? And if they were to find out that we were planted here by extraterrestrials, what would happen to the entire population of the Christian society? Somebody saw that newspaper article and said, oh shit, we can't say we found a flying saucer, because they thought about that. And they corrected their action. Right? So I feel like this was a legitimate case. This was something that really happened. This was something extraterrestrial. So this is something involved with the UFO. I don't know precisely what it is, because think about it this way. My first computer I built, I'd never told
I
any...
tend to think the fact that they lied for so long would cause more unrest than the revelation itself at this point.
Right. I get that. But think about it this way. I've had my computer without the I/O shield for years and years. I've never told anybody, but I just told you. Now all of a sudden it's not that big of a deal. So maybe what we're seeing today, the whistleblower stuff happening, congressional hearings, people saying that UAPs are from another planet, maybe now it's a little more acceptable to say. In the 1940s, if you were to say that extraterrestrials were real, then we were being visited by crafts from another planet, I'm not sure where we would,
How dare you
where we
shroud
would be.
your I/O?
I know, right? the very computer I'm streaming from. I know. In hindsight, shrouding my I/O, I should have caught it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know. I should have shrouded my I/O. But I'm getting at something here. It was my first time dealing with that. And so I was kind of scrambling to do what I needed to do to finish building the computer. And I might have bullshitted my way through it and told people, oh, no, that doesn't go there. Throw it in a tote somewhere and forget about it. And I feel like that's what the government did in 1947 with the Roswell cast. Yeah. That's the government on paper knew what they were doing with extraterrestrial interaction and UFO crashes, but when it really happened, there were so many unknown variables that they didn't know what they were doing. And maybe somebody a little further up the chain, up the ladder, decided, yeah, let's just tell them we found a flying saucer. That'd be cool. So they dropped a press release. Somebody saw it, saw the implications involved with a press release like that, and decided to pull it back. And from that point forward, there was never another press release about flying saucers. Unless you count that incident in California in the 50s. That was interesting. We'll talk about that. But no, it's I think we are legitimately dealing with something paranormal. I think we're dealing with something explicitly extraterrestrial. And this was the first time that the U.S. government had to deal with it. And they didn't know what they were doing. They were like children given a tablet for the first time. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just hitting buttons, seeing what works. And then after a little while, they kind of figured it out. Right? Yeah, somebody further up the ladder decided it was probably in the public's best interest to not say that we're being visited by something from off our planet, which makes sense. Even today, people wouldn't be able to handle it. Organized religion would take a big hit. Something that we believed in for 2,000 years all of a sudden means nothing. Yeah, that would ruffle some feathers. Absolutely. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say, because looking at the totality of the evidence, looking at the thousands of feet of debris, I mean, we watched a video of a weather balloon exploding. We're not getting metallic pieces for thousands of feet and potentially a second crash site. My brain goes to maybe the Roswell crash was the first impact. Came down, hit the ground, sheared off some stuff, bounced off the ground like a ricochet, and the second crash is where they found the bodies, but the first crash was on that guy's ranch. That makes perfect sense to me. Makes perfect sense to me. I mean, skip a stone on the lake. I've seen lots and lots of videos of like high-speed, military jets hitting the ground at, certain angles, and it'll bounce once before it blows up. It happens. You do it right. Think of something shaped like a skipping stone. It's going to bounce off the ground. That's why it bounces off the surface of the water. Well, surface tension has something to do with it, but but no, it's not so far-fetched to really think about it. But I think we're dealing with something legitimately paranormal, and this was the government's first time trying to do a cover-up. They failed at first, but finally somebody got some sense and said, no, we need to walk this back a little bit and fix this narrative. And that's why we were literally given pieces of a weather balloon, pictures of this guy in front of a weather balloon. This is my desktop. This is not the picture I was planning on showing you. Pictures of this guy with pieces of an actual weather balloon, which he looks absolutely incredulous. He's not happy to be there. He's almost laughing in that picture. He literally said that these are not the pieces that I recovered from the ranch. It's almost like they don't know what to do with themselves. Like, here, I'm going to hold this. Is this good? Like he's looking at somebody off to the side. Is this how you want me to pose? Look at the eyes. Same thing here. Same thing here. It's like they're making it up as they go. I will say that these pictures are obviously them with an experimental 1947 weather balloon. However, I don't believe that this is what was recovered from the ranch in 1947. Black stuff? Oh, I see it. Hold on. Let's zoom in. Yeah, it's a good picture there. Whoops. You know, I'm not sure. Let me bring this over to my main monitor. I want to see this up close. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, so this is the string from the weather balloon. That's exactly what that is. But we're looking at... Oh no, that's not string. What is that? Hold on, let me zoom in a little more. I'm resizing as we go.
Is that meant to be the balloon itself?
Maybe, but they weren't. It wasn't black. It does look like a pile of like discarded rubber gloves, right? What a great picture. Let me shrink this down. I need to see the whole picture, and then I'm going to try to find a full screen image of it. What is it? Okay, those eyes. Hold on. Let me find an image. Yeah, so let me kill this, bring this up. So it looks almost like fabric. Yeah, it's... I don't know what that is. You know, a piece of me thought that it was like the strings that go from the balloon to the pod underneath, but that's some kind of fabric. I don't know. I don't rightly know what that is. But look, pieces of wood. Yeah, I'm just not believing it. Let's Google it. Well, the black pieces in the early Roswell debris photos are part of the Project Mogul balloon wreckage, specifically dark, lightweight materials like rubberized fabric, tape, and perhaps even bismuth alloyed metal intended for high-altitude surveillance. But, like, looking back on those other photos, there was nothing that looked like... So like these are 1947 weather balloons right here. Where's the black part? Right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about it at all. It doesn't. I just don't. I don't believe it. But yeah, so I'm going to stick with my conclusion that this was something legitimately paranormal. This was the government's first time dealing with something extraterrestrial, and they did not know how to use it or how to interact with it. They were completely lost. And they tried to cover it up, and then they messed up. They tried to cover it up again, then they messed up again. Then they tried to cover it up again, they messed up again. They're, you know, this is the thing about a lie, is you've always got a lie to cover up that lie, and it just keeps compounding. We've never gotten a clear answer that answered all of the questions. So I'm going to say yes. The Roswell crash in 1947 is very likely, in my opinion, a legitimate case of something paranormal / extraterrestrial.
I'm not saying it's space aliens, right? But it goes without saying it's fucking space aliens.
I don't know what they thought they were doing. Open your eyes and look. It doesn't make sense, folks. It doesn't.
I mean, what they're showing is odds, not what crashed, but maybe it was a dark balloon that they're showing.
Maybe, but I don't know. It honestly just looked like a piece of piled fabric. Maybe, I don't know, because if it was a balloon, it wouldn't have burned. I don't see how it could have turned black. I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm going to say that this is probably legitimate. I like to look at all of the evidence, and all of the evidence is telling me that all of the answers aren't there. And that if it was something we made, sent up in the atmosphere, we should have a solid answer for it. And we don't. We don't have an answer for it. So it's paranormal, man. Simple as that. So that being said, thank you everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, Blit, for being here. Thank you, Puppy, for being here. You popped in for a little bit at the beginning. Appreciate you being here. I appreciate you, all of our new followers, everybody on Facebook that watched, everybody on YouTube that watched. Thank you for everybody that stuck with me for 2 seasons of my strange meandering. I've been doing this for over 2 years now. And y'all haven't booed me off the internet yet, so thank you for sticking with me. This is season 3, episode 1. We've only just scratched the surface.
Pleasure, as always. Good start to season 3.
Thank you so much. I thought it was a good start. There's no other better way to start it. I think next week we might do something cryptid related. I don't know. We haven't done a good ghost story in a while. We've got a few suggestions on the board. If anybody wants to email a suggestion or a story or anything that has to do with paranormal, a suggestion for a future episode, feel free to reach out, beyondshadowspodcast@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. I respond. We'll talk about it on the show. I'm glad everybody's here. Thank you for sticking out with me into season 3. This whole next season is going to be amazing. I look forward to all these incredible stories that we're going to go over with and do a deep dive investigation in. And we're going to have so much fun going forward. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Blip, for being here. You're the best. You're the best. I see Worlds of Confusion popped in. Ollie popped in. Hef popped in. Jeez, Puppy Chat was here for a little while. Streambot was here all night long. Way to go, Streambot. You the best. And thanks to everybody watching on YouTube. Thanks to everybody watching on Facebook. We're going to keep this train rolling. We will see y'all next week. And before we go, we got one little tiny closing monologue to do.
Always forget I can't just hide in the corner.
I'm watching. I'm always
Have
watching.
a nice week, buddy.
I'm glad you popped in, Worlds. Glad to have you here. We're going to hit this closing monologue. We're going to roll the hell out of here. I'll see y'all next week for for season 3, episode 2. Let's knock this thing out. Let's get out of here.
Only a bit creepy.
I'm always watching. Always. So Roswell isn't just a story about something that fell from the sky. It's a story about what happens when the truth becomes inconvenient, when silence becomes policy, and when questions outlive the people who tried to answer them. Whether you believe it was a craft, a classified experiment, or something we still don't have language for, one thing is undeniable. The reaction to Roswell shaped everything that came after. And as long as those questions remain unanswered, the shadows around this case will never fully fade. So if you find yourself in the middle of the desert, surrounded by metallic wreckage, that when you crumple it, it snaps back to its shape, surrounded by metallic beams, so light they feel like balsa wood, with strange symbols on it of a language you don't quite understand, don't panic. Observe. Record in your mind. Because you'll never know who will come along and try to make you change your statements. But whatever you do, make sure you follow us beyond the shadows. Good night, everybody.
A creature like that, I wouldn't ever die.
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Why, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Space. Horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows.